Welcome, everyone, to the XojoTalk podcast. I am your host, Paul Lefebvre, the Xojo developer evangelist. And my special guest for episode 30 of XojoTalk is the one and only Geoff Perlman, founder and CEO of Xojo. Welcome, Geoff.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be back.
So you've kind of been, the last couple of years, my October, September kind of guest. Just now it's a yearly thing. You know, we're stuck every October.
All right. Sounds good.
Which is kind of good timing because lots of neat things happen on the Apple side for things to talk about. So we'll get to that in a bit. But this year, the timing also works out well because at the beginning of October, for the first time ever, we held our Xojo Developer Conference in the fall.
Yep.
So XDC 2016 was in Houston, Texas at the beginning of October. And I thought we might start by talking a little bit about that. So, I mean, what did you think? You did the keynote, and that seemed to be pretty well received by the responses to tweets and the forum thread and the blog post, certainly. So what do you think? What are the sort of things you want to call out about XDC?
Yeah, so I thought it went really well. We've done so many of them now. It's, Dana does most of the work, so I have to give her that credit. But they really go very smoothly these days. I remember when I did my first keynote address at one of our conferences, it was a tremendous amount of preparation. It always is, but I've done so many of them now that it's just a lot easier. It's more about just what are we going to talk about and how are we going to say it and those sorts of things. I agree. I thought the keynote was well received. I think people come to XDC partially to have an understanding of what our roadmap is looking like, and that's what we try to provide. It's always that balancing act, as you know all too well, about how much do we say and then how much detail, and making sure that people understand that a roadmap isn't a promise. It's, this is what we're planning to do. In any, the best made plans of mice and men, however that phrase goes, you can head down a path and find out that, things don't quite work the way you expected. And maybe that means you've got to change your schedule or change some of the details. But that's, roughly what we're going to do. And I thought that went really well. I thought the whole conference really went pretty smoothly.
Yeah, and certainly, talking with people, people really, really appreciate hearing some sort of roadmap. I get from a lot of people that, it doesn't make them comfortable to just work in the dark with tools and not know anything about what even the plans are. They don't necessarily care about, when things are going to happen, but just what direction are things headed. And I think we finally honed it to a point with the roadmaps we do at XDC to kind of give just that amount of information so people pretty comfortable to know what it is we're thinking about, what we're working on, so what they can expect in the future. And the last, we're getting pretty good at these as far as, identifying stuff, knocking stuff off, working down the path, identifying and telling people when, the road tweaked a little here. So, and I think people really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just as human beings, we want to have information, because we make our best decisions with the most information that we can reasonably get. These people are especially the ones that come to XDC, they're really depending on us. And so there's some comfort in knowing that we have a plan, that we think out that far. And I explained this during the keynote that, we have a roadmap internally that typically goes out 12 months. And then beyond that, we have other things that we know we want to do, but we know they're more than 12 months out. So we don't even need to really detail them because the details will come later. But even with that 12-month roadmap, it's like distance. The things that are closer up are crystal clear, and the things that are further down the road are a little fuzzier. So it's like eyesight in that respect. But I think they got that, and I think it makes people feel good to know that, okay, yeah, they've got a plan, and things are going to move in a positive direction.
Well, one of the things that you spent a bit of time talking about at the end of the keynote was kind of the history of Xojo in the community a little bit. And with this year being the 20th anniversary of Xojo, and it's, we had talked about it a little bit on Twitter and stuff in marketing a bit, but I think there were a few people that were a little bit surprised. And I often will get customers or prospective customers emailing me asking a question along those lines. And then I'll say, well, we've been around for, 20 years. And people, oh, really? I had no idea. And so that certainly is a nice thing to bring up. And so I guess my question to you would be, you probably didn't envision being here today, of course, 20 years ago. So,
Yeah, no, so when I got married, it was right kind of at the beginning of us being a product company, right? We'd already been in business 3 years, but we were a consulting company initially, and then we became a product company. And you and I have an interesting thing in common in that we both got married one day apart. In the same year. So most people don't know that. Paul got married the day after I got married. So we both celebrated our 17-year wedding anniversaries this year. And when I got married to my wife, she asked me how long I thought I'd be doing what I'm doing. And honestly, it was in the middle of the internet bubble, and valuations were crazy and companies were buying each other up and all that stuff. So I said, I'd probably 5 years. Now that was in 1999. Right. So yeah, I did not expect to be doing this as long as I have. But on the other hand, if you'd asked me when I was 16 what I'd be doing as an adult, I wouldn't have told you that I'd be living in Austin, Texas and running a development tools company. I never would have guessed that. So that's the interesting thing about life, is you just don't know where it, despite, your planning. I think I tell people, if you plan really, really well, then you at least will be going forward, not backward. But forward has 180 degrees, of delta. So forward might not mean the exact path you thought you were going to take, right? So there it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I doubt many people would be able to know exactly, even 10 years out, I intend to be doing X. I mean,
sure,
things change, and the best thing is to just be able to adapt, see how things are going, and like you said, being able to move forward and take advantage of situations you're in is always key. So
yeah, I don't want to get too philosophical, but what I tell people is, and this may not seem like the case until you think about it a bit, but everybody makes the best decisions they can make at the time that they make them with the information they have. A moment later, they might make a different decision. A day later, a week later, a month later, even 2 seconds later. But at that moment, even when someone makes a decision and says, I know this is the wrong decision, even when they say that to themselves, it's still the best decision they're capable of making, right? So, because if it wasn't, they'd make a different decision. So that's just how it goes. And I think you just have to recognize that as you go through your life, that your life is going to take a path, and it may be what you planned. It may be mostly what you planned. It may be not even close to what you planned.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned this before, that that kind of ties into the concept of strong convictions weakly held kind of thing, where you feel strongly about decisions you make, but as new information comes down the pike, maybe you'll use that to reevaluate past decisions. And you do that. You don't just tie yourself to a decision because you made it once, even if maybe that decision was wrong.
Yeah, so. and you don't. There's no value in raking yourself over the coals over past decisions. The only value that regret has is if it helps you to make better decisions in the future. Beating yourself up about decisions in the past is a futile, pointless, damaging exercise, because you made the best decision you could make. Having hindsight is always 20/20, as we say, right? I may have told you the story in the past, but I saw an interview with a guy that tried to kill himself by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, most people die. He survived. And he said the moment his feet left the bridge, he realized he'd made a horrible mistake. Well, when I tell the story, I tell people the moment his feet left the bridge, he had more information, right? He was now fully committed to his decision. And he realized that with that new information that maybe this isn't what he wanted to do. And he was lucky he survived, right? So, yeah, that's just the way things happen. So give yourself a break for past decisions you've made that didn't work out so well. Use that information to make better decisions in the future. And don't congratulate yourself too much for your good fortune because, half of that was luck, just like everybody else.
That is probably important to remember. Yes.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to XTC, I got to agree with what you said earlier that this entire one really seemed to go very smoothly. It wasn't in the home city, as we like to say, of Austin, like we've done the last couple of years, and that can make coordination a little bit easier. We were a few hours away in Houston. But still, everything went really, really smoothly. We had a couple technical glitches right after your keynote with a projector dying. But other than that, really nothing, which was good. I ended up myself having to do 3 presentations and I moderated 2 panels. And I got to say, that was 5 things, and I was kind of freaked out the week before. But
that is a lot.
But the prep work that I had done and just the fact that I've been to enough and a fair amount of people at these things, that like you said, you feel more comfortable. And that's what I always try to stress to the speakers too before, when I have a little meeting with them beforehand, is that, hey, really, you're amongst friends here doing this. So you can, take it down a notch a little bit, be more relaxed, remember who you're talking to, and enjoy yourself. And I think that really showed in a lot of the presentations. We had quite a few different topics this year. We had not several, but probably many. I don't have the exact number in front of me, of people that had never presented at XTC before that did for the first time, which was always cool because that gives varied topics. This year was the first in a couple years where we didn't put out the vote to repeat sessions. Mm-hmm. Probably also because we're recording them, we didn't need to, but also because the schedule was full.
Exactly. Yeah. There was really no space to fill. We had every session filled, so that was good.
And for people that weren't at XTC, I'll be sure to include a link in the show notes. But you missed out on seeing at the event the first night of Geoff jumping up on stage and playing some drums with the band that was the special event the first night. And you played along with Tom Petty's American Girl, if I remember right.
Yep. Great song. And
it's always funny to watch everyone's that didn't know that you were, quite a good drummer. And people are like, oh, just going to go up there. He's going to, tap the cymbal a few times or something. And then you're just up there wailing. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that the band, of course, doesn't know this either, right? I mean,
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, 2 of the members of the band knew it, but when they brought this up with the rest of the band, they're like, "Oh, no, bad idea." And afterwards, the drummer told me that they get this kind of request a lot, and it almost always is a bad idea. People think they can sing and they can't. They think they can play guitar, whatever it is, and they really can't. But this time, and I did this in 2008 or 2007, something like that.
Yes.
With the same band, though at the time it was the only people in the band that were the same were the female lead singer and the drummer, because they are actually brother and sister. Everybody else in the band has changed. And back then, I approached them right before they went on stage. And I'm standing there with Trish Murphy, and the female lead singer, and Dana, our director of marketing, and me, and they're about to go on stage, and I tell them, hey, I'd really like to do a song with you guys, and the look on Trish's face was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this, but this guy's writing the check.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you can find the recording on YouTube. it's great because at one point you see I think it's the bass player who looks over at me on the drums about halfway through, and he kind of nods and smiles. You can kind of tell he's like, okay, this isn't going to stink. This is actually going to be okay. Well, so this time when they told the band about this, the band was like, oh, bad idea. And they said, no, we've done this before with this guy. He knows how to play, so don't worry about it. Well, we ran through the song once during the sound check, which I think that really made the rest of the band feel, a lot more comfortable. Okay, yeah, you're right. He can play. I've been a drummer since I was, I guess about 12. Played in bands in middle school, high school, after high school. And then as an adult, my life just became more busy. But I've always had drums in my life, and I've written songs and all that. And it is a side of me most people haven't seen, so it's kind of surprising, when you see someone do something they're good at, and you've just never seen that before. You just didn't know that they were good at that. I think that the first time I saw my wife, who's Korean, speaking Korean to her parents, it's like I'd never heard her speak Korean. So
right.
All of a sudden she's speaking this other language fluently. It was kind of a surprise. And I think for a lot of our users that came to XTC, it was the same thing with me playing the drums. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it certainly, that was a good song to pick. Everyone knows it. And so, yeah, that's the room really filled up there. That was pretty neat to see. So yeah. XTC, I do want to remind everyone that wasn't there that the sessions were recorded, as we did last year. And obviously all the attendees will get these recordings as part of their, registration fee, essentially. But if you were unable to attend and you want to get a copy of the recordings, they'll be made for sale when they're made available. It should be by the end of the year, I expect. The video crew is working hard on them as we speak. Not that I can see them, but I trust they are. And
yep. They told me that, or at least Dana told me, I guess, that the video crew told her that they'd be available sometime in December.
All right, so there you go. So there were 36 sessions in all that'll be on there. And so that's a lot of material, lots of cool topics. So you can still check out the XTC site at xojo.com/XTC, so you can get a list of the sessions that were there and who presented them and all that fun stuff.
And I want to say, the thing that I like about XTC, really more than anything, is just talking to Xojo users. That's by far my favorite thing. The hallway conversations and conversations at lunch and at dinner. It's just really great to hear the stuff they're doing. I mean, all throughout the year, they're just an email address or a name on the forum. And, that's great that we have the internet and we got that kind of communication, but it's not the same as being in the same room, face to face with somebody and being able to just sit around during lunch and, finding out who they are and how they found Xojo and what they're doing with it. And that's just stuff that I personally really enjoy. It's my favorite part of the conference.
Yeah, I got to agree totally. And from both sides of the fence. I mean, certainly now it is fun to meet all our customers and see what they're doing. For example, I met Tim Dietrich for the first time at XTC, even though he's the one that interviewed me in the last podcast.
Right.
And, I talk to him all the time for, he does guest webinars and stuff, and we chat occasionally on things he's working on. And so I know him, I've seen him via video and stuff, but I never actually met him and shook his hand. And it was kind of cool to be able to do that. Yep. But also on the flip side, before I worked for Xojo, going as a customer, it was always really cool to see how accessible the Xojo staff is at these conferences. I mean, we just mingle.
Yeah.
When it's time to eat, we spread ourselves out. We mingle with people. We try to talk to different people all the time. And I think sometimes people are just like a little floored, like, what do you mean? They're just talking to us. They're not supposed to do that. And
right. Yeah, no, I agree. And I've been on the other side of that, when I was younger with other software companies. And, it's just our corporate culture. We like being accessible. That's why we're on the forums. Years and years and years ago at one of these conferences, at the feedback session that we have which is the last session, right, of the conference, somebody said, and this was in Austin, by the way, someone said, Geoff, I really appreciate the fact that you, how'd they put it, like jetted in for this conference. And I said, well, I live here. I actually drove to the hotel. I mean, this is, I think people expect, like you say, that we will be not very accessible. And when we are, that's a surprise. And maybe it's because that's the experience they have elsewhere. But our culture is one of being very open and friendly and accessible to our users. So,
yeah, I mean, we actually like them. So go figure.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on from XTC, some of the other tech things that have come up a little bit that we want to talk a little bit about was last month, a new version of macOS came out, since Apple is pumping these things out once a year. And it's they actually changed the name. It's now called macOS instead of OS 10, and its code name is Sierra. So it's macOS Sierra, and the version is 10.12, I believe. What a weird numbering thing. When they announced this, I really, really thought they were going to drop the 10 part, and they would have called it macOS Sierra 12. But they didn't. Go figure.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I didn't think about that part of it. I guess they feel like it's version 10 of the operating system, and it's still the same underlying core operating system that it was, 10 years ago. They've improved it dramatically, but going from macOS 9 to macOS 10, it was a different operating system. It looked the same, and it worked a lot of the same in some ways, but the underlying code was completely different. It's been rewritten essentially.
Yeah, I just find
maybe that's what it is.
I just find the numbering is weird because they're up to iOS 10, but now it's macOS 10, and so next year is where I'm like, what are they going to do? Are they going to do iOS 11, but it'll still be macOS 10.13? And are they really going to go with 13? And
well, yeah, but remember that they're kind of moving away from version numbers with macOS. They're really emphasizing El Capitan, Sierra.
That's true. They do really emphasize those code names.
I think that if you randomly chose 10 Mac users that were running Sierra and asked them what version number is this, I would bet that 8 out of 10 couldn't tell you. They would say, I don't know, it's Sierra.
That's a really good point. It's probably us nerdy types that really just know the version numbers of things. Yeah. I'll have to do a test on less nerdy neighbors and family members and see if they actually have any clue what the numbering is.
Whereas with iOS, all there is the version number.
Right.
So you ask 10 iPhone users, what's the latest version of iOS? And at least 9 out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10 will say, oh, it's iOS 10. Right?
Yeah, that's probably it. If we talk that through, that makes a lot of sense. So you tend to be one of these. I'm obviously an early adopter in that I will grab whatever the latest operating systems are and install them in virtual machines. I generally do not put them on real computers right away. So I'm an early adopter that I want to see it and play around with it, but I don't put it on my real machines right away because I'm a nervous Nelly about stuff like that. But Geoff, on the other hand, is like diving in with, both feet first and saying, new version, I love it.
Damn the torpedoes.
So you put Sierra on your main computer like almost right away?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much as soon as it came out. Yeah. I mean, they have public betas now. I hadn't heard anything horrible. In the past when there were no public betas, we'd get betas because we're a developer, but I would typically do it there. And to be honest with you, as far back as I can remember, there's only been one version of macOS 10 that I felt a little burned by installing it immediately because there was 5 things that weren't working right. And that was, I want to say, around 2007. It feels like it was like Leopard or Snow Leopard or something like that. But that got cleared up within a few weeks. It wasn't a huge problem. And with Sierra, I just installed it and it worked perfectly. I haven't had any problems. In fact, in some ways, it's definitely better. For example, I use Apple Mail, and Apple Mail under El Capitan crashed on me every day, but sometimes more than once a day. And I was wondering when macOS Sierra came out if that would be resolved, because every time the crash dialog came up, it was always in the background. It wasn't I was using Apple Mail. Apple Mail was just open, and I was using another app, and all of a sudden, bang, the crash report dialog comes up. It says Apple Mail has crashed. So I was really curious when Sierra came out if that would be resolved. And sure enough, since installing Sierra, Apple Mail has not crashed once. So I'm happy about that.
Oh, that's a good improvement. Yeah, I waited till after XTC to put it on my laptop. So I have done that. The couple days after I got here, I installed it on my MacBook Air. So I've been running that. It's going to stay on there. That's not really my primary computer, so I can work around any issues. So far, it seems fine. I haven't noticed any real difference. I got to say, Sierra didn't have any really compelling features for me to say, ooh, I want to have this one. So I wasn't as, gung-ho to put it on. I mean, the big thing it added was a Siri integration, and I'm not a big Siri user, so that's not a draw for me. The ability to have things in tabs instead of separate windows is kind of cool, and I think I could find that really useful with all the virtual machines I typically have open. So that is a little appealing because the new version of VMware Fusion does have some support for that. So that would be kind of cool. But I haven't yet put it on my Mac Pro, and mostly because the thing is technically unsupported at this point, and I'm running a different graphics card and different graphics driver. So I got to tread carefully there and let other people be the test beds to make sure all is clean.
Yeah, with Sierra, or not Sierra, with Siri, I use Siri a lot on my iPhone. But, before the iPhone 6S, I didn't really use Siri on the phone much at all. And once they added with the 6S the to use the Hey Siri feature without it being plugged in. Now, see, Siri heard that and my phone and just jumped in.
And you just did that for everybody that's listening through speakers.
Yeah, no, because you have to train it. So yeah, it shouldn't be triggering on my voice, but my phone certainly does. Anyway, I found that when it didn't have to be plugged in, when I could use it anywhere, then I use it a lot. I use that feature a lot. Now, with Sierra having Siri built in, they have a keyboard shortcut for it, but they don't have the ability for you to just activate Siri via voice command yet. Oh. And so that makes it less useful. But the other thing is, and I don't want to say it's not useful because I've explored it, but it hasn't become a habit to use it on the Mac. When you're on a Mac, it's pretty fast to get to your browser and type in a search criteria. That's not the case on a phone. On a phone, you're typing with individual fingers, with your thumbs or whatever. It's a smaller screen. So being able to just give Siri a command is really beneficial on a phone. It is on the Mac, just not quite as beneficial. But I do think that when they get to the point where you can activate Siri via a voice command the way you can on the phone, then I think it'll get a lot more use. And I think Apple is smart in that they know that there are deliverable milestones, right? They know where they're taking the products, but they don't have to get all the way there before they ship. We try to do the same thing. Hopefully most companies do. Recognize when you've added enough value, ship that, and then incrementally improve. So I fully expect in some future version of macOS for there to be the ability to activate Siri via voice. I'm not saying the magic phrase because my phone will activate it. But you know what I mean. So, but other things I like. I agree with you that Sierra is not, oh my gosh, I have to install it right away because there's these 10 features that I can't wait to use. Having said that, there are two features that are in Sierra that for me have turned out to be really great. One of them, the one I love the most, is the universal clipboard. So in Sierra, when I copy something to the clipboard on my phone or on my Mac, it automatically transfers that to the other device. And it's fantastic. It's like I'm on my phone and I've got some text and I need to use that text on the Mac. I can just, or a picture or whatever, I just do a copy and go to my Mac and do paste. And that works extraordinarily well. It's not perfect. Everyone's, you can't wait too long to do the paste. There's some kind of time limit.
Oh.
But it does work, extraordinarily well. I also like the fact that, I've started using iCloud Photo Library, which I think we'll probably talk about later. But I love the fact that, I can take a picture with my phone and seconds later that picture is in the Photos app on my Mac. So if I really need to use that picture on the Mac, I just take the picture from my phone and it shows up on my Mac. Though with the Universal Clipboard, if I wasn't using iCloud Photo Library, I could just copy the picture and paste it, on the Mac. The other feature of Sierra, this is, I guess not technically Sierra, but Sierra enables it. In the iWork set of apps, Numbers, Pages, and Keynote, they've added collaboration. And that feature is in beta right now, but it works really, really well. So that means that with the desktop versions of those apps, whether it's on the Mac desktop in Sierra or on the phone, I can share a document and multiple people can edit the document at the same time, which is really great. We've been using Google Docs quite a bit, as you know, Paul. And with this collaboration feature, we won't have to use Google Docs nearly as much as we used to. We still may use it for some things, but to me, being able to use a desktop app is a much richer experience than using a browser-based app.
Yeah, definitely. I do use Google Docs quite a bit, and I prefer Pages and Numbers when I do get a chance to play around with those, so that will be cool. Unfortunately for me, the Universal Clipboard, as cool as that would be, is not compatible with an old Mac Pro, so I'll never get to see that unless Apple does something cool with that. Yeah, apparently the Bluetooth that this has and something else. It also doesn't support the handoff and continuity. I think they're all kind of related.
Okay. Well, I'm in, as a nod for Apple, I don't know what year your Mac Pro is.
It's old. It's a 2009 that thinks it's 2010, so it's old.
Okay. Well, my MacBook Pro is a 2012, so that's 4 years ago.
Yeah, it works with my MacBook Air, which is a 2013.
Yeah. Okay. So the more recent stuff.
Yeah.
So, but still, 3 or 4 years old. 3 or 4 year old computers. And being able to use those new features, that's pretty nice.
That's not bad.
Stuff, so it's cool.
Yeah, so Sierra is out, and more people will start using it, I'm sure, because Apple's OS upgrades seem to be adopted pretty quickly, especially compared to other platforms. So I suspect I probably will switch to it when the 0.1 comes out and I can verify the graphic drivers are all compatible. That's about when I think I'll pull the trigger for my main computers. It seems like all the apps I primarily use have had their updates for Sierra compatibility, so I think it looks like things.
Yeah, and I bet you that the 10.1 will probably come out next month, is my guess.
Yeah, it's had several betas at this point, so it's got to be pretty close.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on in our operating systems discussion, as Apple tends to do, right alongside, or I guess a week before Sierra came out, the new iOS 10 came out. And this was a pretty big update to iOS. It made a lot of particularly front-facing user-type changes. And I ran this for, I guess on that, I installed it on my iPhone 6 when the Gold Master was made available. So I usually grab that a week before if I've heard the betas are good. Unfortunately, beta testing those things requires you to have multiple devices, which is kind of a pain unless you want to be crazy and put the beta on your main thing. But I went with the GM a week ahead of time. I had no trouble with iOS 10 for installation or usage. I really liked some of the changes it added. The new notifications I love. I think those are great.
Yep, me too. They're on my list of my favorite iOS 10 features. The
home button change was a little weird to get used to, but I prefer it. So that was kind of cool. What were your things that you thought were notable?
Yeah, so the home button was no big deal. That was because I was already, with Touch ID, you're already there, so that didn't seem like a big deal. I'll bring it up again, the universal clipboard. I really love in iOS 10. Like you said, better notifications. I really like the notifications. And with newer iPhones, the 3D Touch, like when the alarm goes off, I use the alarm quite a bit in the clock app. You can swipe down on the notification and then snooze or stop the alarm, which is cool. Another feature that, I heard about and it sounded cool. Then I heard people say it wasn't that interesting. And now that I've tried it, I really like is the clock app's bedtime feature. So you can tell the clock, okay, here's how long I want to sleep for, and here's what time I want to get up. So it says, okay, well, based on that, you need to go to bed at this time. We'll remind you, how far ahead of time you want to be reminded. And so, I go to bed at 11 because I get up at 7, which gives me 8 hours of sleep, which is what I want. And so at 10:30, it says, it does a notification and plays a little charm, a little song, and chime is the word I was looking for. And it tells me, hey, it's time to get ready for bed. We can often tend to not be on a regular sleep schedule, but studies show that a regular sleep schedule, even on the weekends, is actually really, really good for you. So I tend to maintain that, and it helps me do that. But the other thing that's interesting about the bedtime feature that I didn't know is that it actually, in the health app, it keeps track of how much sleep you're getting. So I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but it seems like if you, it has something to do with, when the phone stops moving, and I don't know if they're using an ambient light sensor to determine that the lights have gone off, but it seems to record what time I go to bed. And then when the alarm goes off in the morning, of course, it records what time I got up. And if I wake up in the middle of the night and I use my phone for, 5 minutes, it'll have a recording of that as well. So what you end up with in the health app is this history of your sleep patterns. And, you and I, we're engineers, so we're data minded. And for me, having that constant feedback is a great way for me to stay on track. I weigh myself every morning and I write, I record that health data in the health app for the same reason, because seeing the constant pattern is what keeps me on track. So,
yeah, it's your incentive and keeps you focused. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if my weight goes up one morning, I think about, well, what did I do yesterday? Right? How was yesterday different? Did I not exercise? Did I go out for barbecue, which is a little higher in calories than most things? That kind of thing. And I reorient myself for that day. So, okay, I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to make sure I take my morning walk, whatever it is. So that kind of feedback works. Well, the bedtime feature in the clock app is helping me do that with sleep. And I don't know about you, Paul, but for me, 8 hours is pretty much right. 9 hours is too much, and 7 hours, I can operate on 7 hours, but I definitely would prefer 8. Once you get to 6 or below, it definitely affects how I think during the day. It's easy to get distracted. I don't feel good on 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah, I'm in the pretty much same boat. I mean, you can do 6 in a pinch when you got to, but that's not a great day the day after. And 8 is good. I generally get up probably like 6:30, and so I get similar thing. I don't use the app for tracking my sleep. My wife does, though. She absolutely loves it. Thinks that's the coolest thing as well, and is surprised that doesn't get a little more, notice from people that's useful.
Yeah, the other thing is, and I think that this might be only you have an iPhone 6, right?
Well, we'll talk about that in a bit.
Oh, okay.
I did until yesterday, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I believe the iPhone 6S and 7 have this feature that's new to iOS 10, and that is when the phone can kind of figure out that you're trying to look at it. So when you tilt it towards yourself, the screen comes on. And I found that that's really handy. Like I'll be, watching TV, and I don't know what time it is, and all I have to do is lift the phone towards myself, and the screen comes on, and I can see the clock, on the face of the phone. So I don't have to, press a button or do Touch ID or anything, and so just, or if my phone rings or a notification happens and I'm out somewhere, I can pull the phone out of my pocket and just look at it, without having to move my fingers around or reorient them to engage the phone. The phone somehow knows I'm looking at it, and the screen comes on so I can see those notifications.
Well, totally. And that's kind of a good segue into the next topic, which is, iOS 10 came out, but, Apple doesn't release new big iOS versions unless they get a new phone to showcase it. And This time the new phone was the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. And I originally wasn't thinking I was probably going to jump on the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus bandwagon. But then Verizon put out a deal where they were offering a $650 trade-in for old iPhone 6s. And which is essentially was its full price. And so I really couldn't pass that up. So I did end up ordering. And at the time, one thing I did want to do was upgrade to the larger Plus model. I just had a regular 6.
Okay.
So I did end up ordering back on September 19th. So after the initial wave, I waited a few days to read reviews and stuff. I ordered a 7 Plus, and it arrived yesterday. So I've had it for less than 24 hours, so I've been playing with it. But yeah, that raise to wake feature is awesome. You just pick up the phone and it lights really up, and it's just like, oh, cool, and you throw it back down, and I mean, so far I'm still playing around with it, so I haven't done too much with it. I really, really like the new non-home button. That's probably my favorite change.
Yes.
I found the old home button to be unreliable in, recognizing of clicks. It always felt a little squishy to me, and like it was not going to last super long. Although the iPhone 6, I never had any real problem with it, but it just never felt real great. And this new one where it's not a button, you're just kind of squeezing the device, but it vibrates a little bit. I just think it feels like a rock. And I set it on the lightest setting, and it's quieter. I just like it a lot better. And of course,
I'll tell you, the early reviews of it were people weren't so sure about it, and they'd say, "Oh, I got to put it on the strongest setting and all that." And I was a little nervous because I ordered my iPhone 7 before I had a chance to go to an Apple store and get my hands on it and try it out. But I thought, it'll be okay, and it's not like they're going to change it back, so it is what it is. So I went to a local Apple store and tried it out, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is fine." And one of the things I like about the iPhone 7 is the haptic engine that provides the vibration is even better. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the picker control, like for picking dates, as you roll that, they use the haptic engine to provide feedback. So it feels like you're physically rolling.
Yeah, you get these very subtle ticks as you slide through that it allows you to just be subtly more precise because you feel when it's moving.
Yeah, and it just feels a little more tactile and less virtual, which was just a really interesting way to use that feature. So yeah, and the other thing I did in transferring from the 6S to the 7 was I remembered this time, and this is an important thing for those of you that haven't done this yet. If you're using the Health app, you need to do a full backup, but make it encrypted. If you don't encrypt your full backup, when you restore that backup onto a new phone, you lose all your health data. The health data is not backed up unless it's an encrypted backup. And in iTunes, it does say that, but it doesn't warn you. It doesn't bring up a dialogue. There's just a couple sentences near the encryption checkbox, which is easy to miss. And I missed it last time. When I went from the 6 to the 6S, I missed it and lost all of my health data, which was really, really aggravating. So this time I didn't. The other thing I do, and the reason I upgrade when new phones come out, is that they always improve the camera. I saw something where Apple said that, the camera is the most used feature of the iPhone. And so they pour an enormous amount of time and energy and technology into it. And my feeling about the camera, Paul, you and I have another thing in common, that we have kids that are close to the same age. So I'm sure, like me, you take a lot of pictures of kids. you can't go back and take a picture again. You get that one opportunity to take it, and then your kids get bigger, and you can't go back and retake a picture from 5 years ago. So for me, I want to have the best camera that I can carry around. They say the best camera in the world is the one you have with you, and so doubly so would be to have the best camera you can have with you. So that for me is a big thing. I've looked back at mostly at video that I took of my kids when they were toddlers, and already it feels like, wow, that kind of looks old.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because at the time when my kids were little like that, I would have been using a handheld camcorder that used the digital video tapes.
Exactly, me too.
And I mean, those weren't HD or anything like that. And at the time, they seemed like they were super quality. And I mean, I suppose they're better than film-based video recording.
And they still had the 3:4 aspect ratio.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I still got a drawer full of those mini DV tapes somewhere here. And I think I've got them all transferred to the computer. But if I didn't, I don't even know how I would do that anymore.
Yeah, it's challenging. And when I know what you did when you got married, but when we got married, I knew that I wanted it on digital because I'd want to edit it myself. So I've got the wedding videographer. He gave us a VHS tape. Remember, folks, this was 17 years ago. He gave us a VHS tape that he had edited, sort of, and then he gave us the raw digital tapes. And I've transferred all that to the computer, and slowly but surely I've been editing it in iMovie. But here it is, yes, 17 years later, and I still don't really have it all the way done. It tells you how important of a project that is, but one day I will. Anyway, going back to the iPhone 7, it's faster. I like that. Battery life seems to be better. I like the speakers, having two speakers. You get when you're on speakerphone.
I was testing that last night. It's amazing. You can get it loud enough that the phone kind of vibrates in your hand. Yeah,
it is pretty good. And while I haven't tested this feature yet, and I'm sure you haven't either, the water, they don't say waterproof. They say water resistant. And this is another thing I think Apple does really well. They kind of under promise and over deliver. So they say, it's water resistant, right? And it turns out that it really is waterproof. I've been reading articles where people have said, they've taken it underwater for, down to, 20 feet or something, and had it down there for quite some time and brought it back up, and the phone continues to work just fine. So it is waterproof. I think that's...
Yeah, either way, I'm not likely to test that very much. I'm not going to intentionally get mine wet, but it is more of a comfort thing. Now if you get stuck in a rainstorm, you're not like, thinking which pocket you can stick it in that'll keep it the driest, and things like that. If you have to pull it out in the rain to use it, that's probably the big thing where I would get the most concerned. And now I can kind of just shrug that off a bit. I'm not going to try and swim with it or anything like that. But
and the other thing I think is probably the singular most important feature of the iPhone 7. And really, this has been a sort of, not a marquee feature of past iPhones, but it's certainly, more true now than it ever has been. The iPhone 7 doesn't explode.
Yes, it was funny when I was flying to and from XDC, just how all the flights, had to have that special announcement for poor Samsung. And I remember asking you at XDC, so is it, they say, any publicity is good publicity, but really, is this good publicity?
No, this is really bad publicity. Now you can't even take one on the flight at all. At first it was, if you had a Galaxy Note 7, it had to be off and you couldn't charge it. Now they won't even allow it on the flight or in your luggage, even powered completely down. This is a perfect example of karma. Most people don't realize that the reason that Samsung had this problem is that they tried to rush the Note 7 to market to steal Apple's thunder. They wanted to get the phone out before Apple released the iPhone 7, which, as a company, competition, all that, I totally get that. But clearly they took some shortcuts that resulted in some quality control problems. And, most people don't realize that it's not like every phone has this problem. It's, I think, 0.1% of Galaxy Note 7s have this. And that's, not a very big number unless you're one of those people.
Right. And of course, proportion to the iPhone, there's not as many of those that are sold. So it's still, you hear a lot about it.
Well, it is their flagship phone. The Samsung is the I think the biggest maker of phones in the world. They sell more phones than Apple does. I'm pretty sure about that. I could be wrong, but I think they do. The Android market is, I think, 80-90% of the market. And the Galaxy Note 7, unlike the Edge 7 is kind of the high-end phone, is my understanding. The Note 7 is the lower-end one. So that they call it their flagship product. So,
well, the big downside is just, I've been reading that a lot of people don't, and this is a little bit of a concern even for iPhone users, is don't know the difference between the Samsung phones. So they're just like lumping it as Samsung phone problem when it's really just one specific model, and maybe the regular,
for sure,
the Galaxy S isn't affected, this Edge isn't. But they're banned on flights now. Well, do you expect the airline people to be able to tell the difference by looking at one? Are they just going to say, "Oh, you get a Samsung phone, you can't use it"? Are they going to completely flip out and say, "That's it, no phones, it's too much of a risk"? And that would be totally awful.
Well, that's no phones at all would be the big concern. I think they understand they can't get it. That hurts them. I think that they can't get away with that. People, phones have become, we call it a phone, but honestly, it's really, if you look at how if you look at how a lot of people use it, it's more of a pocket computer that happens to also be a phone.
Right. So, yeah, totally. It's the name phone has been twisted to become pocket computer at this point. Right.
In fact, Microsoft's label for their phones originally was the Pocket PC, right?
Right.
That's what it was called. I don't know that was a phone or not. I think it was. Maybe it was just a PDA at the time. But yeah, that was their name, Pocket PC.
Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue.
Well, it kind of does. It reminds me of PowerPC. Anyway. So...
Yeah, so my iPhone 7 is been pretty neat so far. I like it. I got the black one here. I'm holding it up for Geoff to see. Oh, and it lit up when I lifted it up.
I got black too. Oh, that reminds me of one other feature of the iPhone 7 that was an improvement. So I always get the black leather case.
Right.
And they actually improved the black leather case. Now I'm going to describe this, but I'll show it to Paul. So this is an iPhone 6 that has the old black leather case. And what you can see is they make little indentations in the leather for the buttons.
Right.
See those?
Yep.
Well, that's just a sort of a indentation, and that makes it difficult to find them with your fingers and to press them. And that kind of gets worn down with your fingers the more you use the case. With the iPhone 7 black leather case, what they've done is they've actually inserted plastic buttons. So there's an actual, let's see if I can get this. There's an actual plastic button there and on the other side, right? So for the volume up and down. So that's been great because it's you can feel them more easily. You can tap them more easily. It feels like they're not going to wear down, so definitely an improvement.
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty useful. I don't use those leather cases. I ordered a kind of a generic case from Amazon yesterday. I get a magnet wallet case that is, I can magnetically attach it to the wallet part. And then when I get in the car, I can pull the phone out of the wallet part, and then I have a magnet mount that's in the car, and it'll just stick up and hold it there. I actually have a magnet mount here on the desk that I just usually slap my phone up against so I can look at it. So I'm hooked on magnets. Magnets are magical things. I love them. So yeah, I use that. My phone, I was a little surprised. It took essentially a month for the phone to arrive. So we actually ordered 3 because my daughter and my wife also did the upgrade since Verizon was being very generous about the trade-in allowance. But they just got iPhone 7s. They didn't get the pluses. So I had ordered them. And, I kept checking the status all the time. We were at XDC, everyone that's there is showing me their new iPhones, and I'm getting jealous, and I keep checking the status. And when I got back, I called Verizon and said, hey, what's the deal? It just says processing. It hasn't changed status. It's been almost 3 weeks at this point. And they're like, well, all the iPhones are back ordered until October 15th. And I'm like, seriously? Okay. So October 15th rolls around. I call them up again, talk to the person, and they check, and they say, oh, according to this, yours are expected to ship on November 9th. And I'm like, seriously? Again? That seems a little ridiculous. 2 months to ship the phones. They're in stock everywhere. I can walk in the mall and get them. I can walk in the Verizon store and get them. Why would they not be shipping?
Yep.
And they had no answers. They wouldn't say anything. They just, that's when it says it's going to ship, blah, blah, blah. And then the day after, I went to the Verizon store near the mall to talk to a human being that was there. They kind of told me the same thing. On both cases, I kept asking, well, why? Then they would say, oh, well, it's because you got a plus, and it's got to wait. They won't ship anything until they're all in stock. And I was like, what? And then I went and checked my email I got from them, and it said the total opposite thing, that they would ship when they were available, not when they were all in stock. So I was just getting tons of conflicting information. But finally, this past Sunday night, about 9 p.m., I got a text from Verizon that just out of the blue says, your phones are processing for shipment. And then sure enough, Monday morning, I start getting shipment notifications. And like an hour after that, Apple put out 10.0.3 that had a fix for connectivity problems on Verizon. Yeah. So my conspiracy theory, unsubstantiated, is that they were maybe asked by Apple to hold some of these until that release came out. Maybe there was some significant issue with connectivity.
That reminds me. I had a similar experience, although it was a little more bizarre in that I was hoping my phone would show up before XDC and I could take it with me, but it didn't. It was going to ship the week after XDC. And it said, it was going to ship sometime between the 6th and the 12th of October. Then all of a sudden it was processing for shipment, and then it said, it's shipping. And, these are coming from China. So I'm figuring that, I'm going to see it, take 3 or 4 days to get here. No, it went from shipping to on the truck for delivery, like in a day, which was really a little strange. Like the phone was already here. But the other thing is, so the way I get my phone, you got yours through Verizon because they had a great deal. I get mine with Amex points. And so I have to wait for Amex to have the new phone available on Amex Rewards, right? And so that takes a week or two for it to show up. It's been getting shorter and shorter. Well, the only one they had was the T-Mobile phone. I have AT&T, so that's not a problem. T-Mobile and AT&T use the same network. But with the iPhone 7, so for those of you that have not upgraded, with the iPhone 7, they've done something a little different. The AT&T and T-Mobile phones only work on AT&T and T-Mobile with the iPhone 7. If you get the Verizon or Sprint iPhones, those will work on Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, and AT&T. They work on all of the networks. So the problem was I couldn't get a Verizon phone for iPhone 7 because Amex Rewards only had T-Mobile. Well, I went to an Apple store before my phone arrived, and they said, hey, just bring the phone here when you get it, and we'll exchange it for a Verizon model. So as soon as my phone arrived, I just drove down to the Apple store, and they swapped it out for a Verizon version of the phone. So now that's what I've got.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I suppose it is one benefit for me having to wait for the Verizon one. Should I ever switch? Yeah. I can.
And they're saying that on resale, which is the thing I'm thinking about, you probably get about $50 more on an iPhone 7 when you eventually resell it, because the person buying it will be able to use it on any network. Versus if you're selling an AT&T or T-Mobile phone, they'll have to use it on the network that that they're on. AT&T.
Right. Well, one so-called marquee feature on the iPhone 7 is the removal of the headphone jack. Lots of controversy around that. I primarily use wireless headphones. I'm actually wearing them right now, even though there is a wire sticking out of them. I only use the wire with the Mac. Otherwise, they're Bluetooth wireless.
Okay.
And these are great, and I use them all the time, pretty much. So I'm not going to notice too much that there's a missing headphone jack. I do have my other headphones here that I got the adapter connected to, but I haven't actually tested the adapter. These are my in-ear ones that I use like when I'm lying down or something like that. So I don't particularly think the lack of a headphone jack is going to be a big deal for me personally. You had mentioned at some point, though, that you think the AirPods might be pretty cool.
Yes, I'm planning on getting the AirPods. They're supposed to come out this month. They're not available yet. I walk, every morning 3 miles with my dog. So I listen to podcasts and music and stuff. And not having that wire dangling, I've caught it a couple of times with my arm as I've, moved my arms around. The untangling headphones, that sort of stuff. It would be great to not deal with that anymore. And then it, of course, makes the removal of the headphone jack a sort of a non-issue. People love to speculate about stuff that they can't get their hands on, right? We've experienced that as a company, the Xojo. I've heard people say, "Oh, those AirPods, people are going to lose them." Well, probably not, because the AirPods come with a case, and that case is actually a charger. So when you're done with your AirPods, you're going to put them in the case and probably put the case in your pocket or on your desk, and that's going to recharge them, right? And you can plug that case into it has a charger itself. It has a cable itself to charge it. But based on that, I don't see people losing them. I think it's cool that, when you take one out of your ear, the music stops immediately. It knows that, so they've got some neat features. And then it, of course, solves the problem of, what if I need to use the earphones and charge my phone at the same time? Well, obviously it's not an issue when they're wireless. So I think Apple recognizes that those are going to be very, very popular.
Yeah, I've been using wireless headphones now for almost a year, I guess. And once you switch to going with wireless headphones, it's hard to go back to one with a wire, because you constantly get caught on it. Even now, I'm using my Bluetooth wireless headphones with a wire that's plugged into the Mac, because the Mac's Bluetooth isn't great. And if my cat comes in here, he'll snag himself on the wire. Sometimes it looks like he might be wanting to chew on it, and I got to kick him out. And then I'll sometimes hit the wire and then send something flying on my desk, and it's very annoying. I'd much rather just have, no wires whatsoever. And it is great with the phone because you just stick it wherever too. If your phone's tucked in your coat, you don't have to try and loop a wire out through your coat to get up to your head.
That's right. That's right.
So
I think wires are one of those things that our kids will tell their kids. Yeah, when I was little, we had wires connecting things together, and their kids will be like, "What?" It's like when my kids first saw a phone that was physically connected to a location. By the time they were old enough, we'd gotten rid of our home phones, and I'd say for the last at least 10 years, but maybe a little longer, probably 12 years, we've had wireless phones or, cellular phones only. So when my kids were little and they first saw a phone that was like connected to a place that wasn't one you could just stick in your pocket, they thought that was really kind of cute.
Yeah, cute. And we just think back and go, "Oh, that was awful." But
yeah, but now I think wireless is the equivalent of that. It's like, things are becoming more and more wireless. So I'm really looking forward to them. I was talking to an entrepreneur here in Austin this past weekend, and we've got onto the subject of the AirPods. And he had a really interesting comment about them. So he has hearing aids, so he's hearing impaired, and he designs things for people that are deaf or hearing impaired. One of the things he makes is a lamp that connects via Bluetooth to your phone. So the lamp will flash, like if you're getting a phone call, or it can detect like if someone's at the door, all this kind of stuff. So it's home automation for the hearing impaired. Anyway, we're talking about the AirPods, and he pulls his hearing aids out of his ears, and he has the kind that are almost invisible. Okay, I noticed them because my mom has the same ones, but they're almost invisible. And he holds them out and he says, "You see these?" He says, "These are designed to be nearly invisible because people with hearing impairment don't want to advertise that fact. So you really want them to be not noticeable at all. But Apple has changed that because people are used to encountering and having conversations with people that have their earbuds in their ears.
Right.
They don't pull them out to talk. They keep them in their ears and they still have a conversation. So that's become an okay thing. It's almost a fashion statement. I said, yeah, think about the early iPod ads. They had people dancing in silhouette on a colored background, and the thing that stood out in bright white was the iPod and the earbuds. Right? So what he was saying is that the earbuds, the new ones, are you're halfway to a well, actually you're not even halfway, perhaps, but you're almost to a low cost hearing aid, a high quality, low cost hearing aid, because they have a microphone, right? And they're in your ears. They've got amplification. That's all a hearing aid is an amplifier. And they're pointing out that, the earbuds are, I think, going to be $159.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and that's a lot more than the wired ones. However, if you buy a nice pair of hearing aids, which this guy had and my mom has, those cost $5,000 to $6,000. So you may see the AirPods morph into a form of hearing aid for people that are hearing impaired, which for them could be a really terrific thing.
Well, I mean, my wife has certainly been keen on them. She's actually deaf in one ear, can't hear out one ear, and which is inconvenient because she's also a middle school teacher.
Yeah.
So she has hearing aids that go in her deaf ear and that transmit wirelessly to a hearing aid that's in her other ear.
Oh,
so
wow.
that she can hear sounds that would be on the other side of her head that she wouldn't otherwise be able to hear. And she also runs. And the cool thing about the AirPods is that right now, every time I get her some headphones or something, they're always two. They're connected. Yeah. And the second one is worthless to her. She can't hear anything out of that one. So she's always got the second one that's dangling down or something. In the past, we've tried cutting them. That often destroys them.
Yeah. Surprising how that works.
Yeah. So, but the AirBuds work with just one. You can just put one in. And it also, what you just described, if you put two in, do they both have the microphones? If they did, they could possibly work as picking up the sound that she can't hear on one side and transmit it to the other side with, probably just a software update or something. So, yeah, that's certainly something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and Apple has been pretty good about, in the past, on the Mac and on the iPhone, with dealing with people who have disabilities of various kinds, whether it's, the keyboard being, the mouse being, having it so that you can do everything from the keyboard, speaking text for people that are sight impaired. They've been pretty good about accessibility. And I'm interested to see where they go with the AirPods in terms of accessibility. They may not do anything like version 1, but I would be surprised if in subsequent versions or software updates to the phone or whatever, that we don't end up seeing those. And they pair perfectly too. I've seen the demo of how you pair them. It's like, it's the easiest Bluetooth pairing in the world. Which is, Bluetooth pairing. I can deal with it. Us techies can deal with it. But like my mother-in-law has an iPad and she wanted a keyboard for it. And I told my wife, we cannot get her a Bluetooth keyboard. So we actually got her the camera adapter and got her a USB keyboard to plug in that way. Yeah, notice that Apple, with the keyboard on the iPad Pro, it's not Bluetooth.
Right.
Yeah, it has there's a physical connector, that and it's a brilliant way they've done it, but it's not Bluetooth, which is interesting.
Well, speaking of tech things, our last topic we'll cover here briefly before we wrap up so that people don't have the world's longest podcast to listen to is right before we started recording this, Apple sent out the announcement that they're going to have another event at the end of October called Hello Again that is apparently, I don't know if they came right out and said it, but I think it's, super strongly implied that it's going to be talking about Mac related things. And at this point, everyone is fully expecting new laptops, particularly a MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
And then people are hoping that all the Macs might even get updated. Like me personally, I'm hoping that maybe they jettison this trash can Mac Pro and come out with something that is a little more practical, but that has almost zero chance of happening. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a 2012 MacBook Pro, and so it works great, but I'm anxious for a new one. So I think it's almost 100% certain that there will be a new MacBook Pro. I don't think it's going to be surprising if you've been following the rumors. I think it's going to be pretty darn close to what the rumors say. I'm a little concerned. I've been hearing that they may announce it at the end of this month, but it may not be available until January. It doesn't sound like Apple to make an announcement that far in advance, and it also doesn't sound like them to miss the Christmas season, which, Apple's first quarter of their fiscal year is the last quarter of the calendar year. So their first quarter is the Christmas season.
Is now. Right? Yeah, it's now.
Now. That's right. So they don't want to miss that. It's their best quarter of their year. So I don't know if I believe that part of it. I'm guessing that there will be at least a MacBook Pro and a new iMac. Though I have to say, it won't surprise me at all if they refresh the entire line, MacBooks, and at least MacBooks and then the Mac Pro. I agree with you that I don't think they'll abandon the design because of the Mac Pro, the cylinder. It's funny you call it a trash can. I actually like the way it looks. I think it's pretty cool, and I think that most of the people that use it are creative professionals. And they want something that looks cool on their desk.
Oh, I totally agree. It looks cool.
And it has there is a practical side to it in terms of cooling and no fans and all that stuff. So there may be other reasons that it's not as practical, but understanding who they're designing that for doesn't surprise me. Oh, going back really quickly to ship dates. Another reason that I don't think that they would announce in October to ship in January, beyond the other reasons, is Tim Cook himself came from that side of Apple. In other words, his job before being CEO is to make sure that stuff got made on time and at the best price, and the shipping, all that stuff, those logistics. That was the part of Apple he comes from. So that's got to be near and dear to his heart. His standards for that must be extremely high. So I can't see them announcing stuff that far in advance and missing that window. That just, yeah.
I mean, it's not usually the stuff they announce far in advance is a brand new product that they just want to get ahead of, like they did with the watch and the original phone. They didn't pre-announce the iPad at all. Yeah, they did. That was a few months out as well. But just a regular Mac laptop, I mean, even if it does have the cool new touch function bar or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like that's new enough to warrant a lead time, really. So it would only be manufacturing that would cause a lead time. And like you said, Tim Cook is not going to stand for that. So,
yeah, and I got to say, when I first heard about it, which from a rumor I read today, it's called a Magic Bar.
Right, that's the name. Yep.
Yeah. When I first heard about it, it felt a little gimmicky. And then I realized, Apple, there are lots of companies that do stuff that's gimmicky. Apple really doesn't tend to do that. So I started thinking about it, and I realized that the cool thing about that bar is that it's programmable on an application basis. So imagine us being able to have, normally the function keys are basically just for the OS more than anything else, volume control, muting, play, pause. And I frankly don't end up using many of them. But with a programmable bar, it could change based on what applications in the foreground, especially for us at Xojo, for a development tool. That could be pretty darn interesting. I think we could do some really interesting things if it turns out that it is what I think it's going to be.
Yeah, it would certainly be. It'd just be interesting to see. I mean, and even if it could do, non-traditional things like maybe display status messages or,
right.
I mean, what could it be used for? I mean, who knows? But that would be more useful to just have that different way to show information. Of course, it would at this point be limited to, MacBook Pros, so laptop users, and
sure.
it would be excluded from other ones. But
like the Retina screen, it started off on the iPhone, then it went to the MacBook, and can you get an iMac with a Retina? Yeah, you can get an iMac with a Retina screen now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they think it's neat, they got to start with it somewhere. And by far, most people that use Macs are running laptops. I mean, you've got me and my Mac Pro here. I'm the 1%, so right. Apple doesn't care about what I want.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, I think that you're right that in terms of sheer quantity, they sell more MacBook Pros MacBooks than I think anything else.
Yeah, well, like someone like me really wants a Mac Pro that's expandable, and Apple's like, yeah, no, we're out of that. We don't build computers like that anymore. So it's just like, that's why when I say they don't build what I want, that's what I would want. They have no interest in building that anymore, so that makes me a little sad. But oh well. This Touch Bar will be interesting to see. I certainly think it'll be exciting just to have I'm not a longtime Mac user compared to some people, but Macs are just fun. They're kind of were the beginnings of Apple, for many people, and it's neat to see what innovations they might try to apply there. And the stuff's been stagnating so long; it's a running joke at this point. So they kind of had to do something.
Yeah, and like the sites, a lot of the sites have been recommending lately to not buy a new Mac because the Macs are so old. They haven't been revved in so long, there's bound to be new ones out. So
yeah, I've got friends and neighbors that come to me all the time, and I've switched them over to Macs. And I my hairdresser that lives across the street, her iMac is from 2008, and I've been there a couple times this year to salvage some stuff off it and whatnot. And she's like, "Oh, should I think about getting a new one?" And I'm like, "No, not yet. Wait."
Yeah, a friend asked me because they were getting their high school age daughter a new laptop, and they were thinking about getting a MacBook, and they asked me, is this the right time to get one? I said, no, this was in September. I said, I think you should wait because the rumors are that there's going to be an announcement at the end of, or in October sometime. So it'd be kind of a shame to buy one and then have new ones out, a month or two later. Going back to the Magic Bar though, it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure Apple's got a really good idea of how to use it. It'll be interesting to see how developers use it. And I think it's a little taste of something bigger yet to come. I think that Apple is going to do with the entire keyboard what they've done with the Magic Bar, and that I think we'll still have physical keys, but I think they're going to make the keys have some sort of e-ink capability.
Yeah, I've seen there's a few people that make keyboards like that now that are pretty high end.
Yeah, and they're high end now, but I think Apple's going to start building keyboards like that because there's all kinds of interesting things you could do if you had that. Heck, if nothing else, you could tell looking at the keyboard. Not everyone like you and me touch types, right? So you could tell if the caps lock key is on, right? Because the letters could draw in lowercase on the physical keys when the caps lock or when the shift key isn't down and the caps lock isn't on, right? And then symbols and you have to have. Apple has to make. Here's a really practical reason. Apple makes different MacBooks in different markets because of the keyboard. In France, you need a French keyboard. In Asian countries, like my wife's Korean keyboard. But if you had an e-ink capability, you could make a single keyboard for all of your MacBooks, all your laptops. You wouldn't need different keyboards and thus all the inventory problems that go along with that.
Right.
So,
yeah, actually I saw at XTC we had a customer from, I think it was the UK somewhere, and they had their laptop, and the keyboard even there looked different, even though it was still an English keyboard, and it had things were labeled like the return and the enter key didn't. I don't think they said return on it. It had just like a big arrow or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
and I was like, what? I was all confused for a few minutes. He was like, no, that's what it looks like, and I pulled out my MacBook Air, and labels were utterly different.
Yeah, I always figured they had one key that had O and U on it because they always seem to add extra U's to their words over and over.
Or as they say, we've lost ours over time.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that they're, having this announcement. I'm looking forward to it. I hope that it is, more than just a new MacBook Pro, that they're revving across the board. At Apple, the guy that's sort of at the top of the food chain on the Mac side, he is in charge of all of the Macs, Mac Pros, MacBook Air, etc. iMacs. He's in charge of all that, and they all have been are long in the tooth. They all need to be revved. So I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that they rev the whole shooting match.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to pay attention to, and it's got to be good for Apple because they've still been selling a fair amount of Macs each quarter, even though they've been older. So this can only be good news for them because obviously a lot of people have had to have been waiting and are going to be all over new stuff.
Yep. All
right. Well, thank you, Geoff, for being on XojoTalk this month. Everybody loves hearing from you, and it's always fun to have geek talk.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.